If you just got injured in Jiu-Jitsu, I'm going to share with you my top tips so that you can get back on the mat as soon as possible. Hey guys, it's Dr. Josh. Today's episode is going to be all about getting you back on the mat and some of the top tips that I recommend so that you can get out of your injury, start to strengthen it, and get back on the mat as soon as possible. Before we even get into the content, can you do me a favor by either liking or sharing this information with somebody who needs this? This allows us to get the information, meaning the injury information, into those hands of the people that need it the most. So thank you again and enjoy the episode. So one of the most important things when it comes to getting an injury and getting over an injury is the evaluation. I know it's daunting. I know it's something you possibly don't want to do. You don't want to spend the time or the money and you don't want to do it. But I can promise you having the proper diagnosis is probably the most important step. Obviously, there are a lot of different important steps, but getting a good grasp on what you're actually dealing with is probably one of the, or if not the most important thing. The second most important thing after the diagnosis is the actual plan. So after you figure out what's going on, then you have to figure out what the plan is. So is it going to require treatment? Is it going to require surgery? Is this going to require at least 6 months or 6 weeks worth of rehab prior to a reevaluation? So again, figuring out if you actually have this type of condition or what type of condition you actually have. And then 2, following the actual treatment plan that you have been provided with is going to be the top 2 most important things right out of the gate. What you also need to do is understand what we call mechanism of injury as well as pain triggers. Mechanism of injury really just means that we understand how we hurt ourselves. Sometimes it's really hard to figure it out. Sometimes it's not, right? So if you fall on a hand or something like this and you sprain your wrist, well, you obviously know how you did it. But understanding your mechanism of injury or how you got injured is really important because typically what we find is that those people who hurt themselves in a specific way are intolerant to those positions. So let's use the hand position. If we fall on our hand and we sprain our wrist like this, it's going to hurt to do this, right? So what we do is we kind of avoid those movements at the beginning or in the process of our rehab protocol. So again, understanding your triggering symptoms is going to be really important because if you constantly keep triggering them, then it's going to create more irritation. It's going to be much harder to heal. So my advice right off the bat is understand how you got injured, how you can get better, what creates your problem, and what relieves your problem is going to be really important. And that's what I use in my baby steps of how you get better is, right? Figuring out what hurts it and what doesn't hurt it and do more of the things that don't hurt it at the beginning. So piggybacking off the last tip is figuring out what exercises help you. There are really a few different exercises, one that provides pain relief, one that can help do corrective care or neuromuscular re-education is sometimes what we call it. Yes, it does help strengthen. And then of course, what are some exercises that absolutely strengthen it? And you usually have to follow those in sequence. So, right, you first have to get out of pain. You have to start avoiding triggering activities. You have to find exercises that relieve your injury or your pain. And then you have to slowly correct or re-educate and give beginner level exercises before you can get to advanced level strengthening. You really need to be systematic when it comes to your approach of your rehab and your protocols. Too many people do a few things wrong, and one of those things wrong that they do is they add too many exercises or they change it up too quickly. So what that does is that if you add too many exercises, and let's just say 5 exercises are really good for you, but you add 7 or 8, maybe it takes away from your progress, and now it's going to take you maybe 3 or 4 or 5 weeks to figure out that those 2 or 3 exercises were not optimal for you. And what that does is that creates a lot of frustration, and so you really need to be systematic and you need to slowly add exercises versus start with a bunch of exercises and then have to systematically take away. Because if you add too many exercises, it's going to take a long time to figure out how to retract those exercises and to find out systematically what is actually the problem and what exercises are good versus what exercises are not good for you. In addition, if something is working, even if you feel like you're not progressing, you may need to just stay there for some duration of time, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe more. But some people, what they do is they think they're getting better, and they are, but they end up adding too high level exercises, too much strengthening exercises all at once. So you need to slowly build. So instead of adding maybe one different exercise, can you go up from 3 sets to 4 sets on each exercise before you increase your quality of the exercises? So what we really need to do is add capacity first. And when I say add capacity, instead of doing, let's just say 3 sets of 10, can you now handle 3 sets of 15? Then can you handle 4 sets of 10 or 4 sets of 15 before you go on to the next exercise? Be very systematic, and that is where a good provider or a good program or a good coach can come in. One of the worst advices that you can get is just to rest. There is always a way to stay active. So if you have a hand injury or a back injury, can you walk? Can you run? Can you do things? One of the biggest challenges that I have as a rehab and sports chiropractor is that how do we keep the athlete as healthy as possible, but while undergoing and battling an injury? So if we end up starting here and we're like really high level or as fit as we possibly can, and then we get injured, if we just completely stop, you're going to take a massive dip in your cardiovascular health, your strength, and then when it comes time to return to the sport, you're going to be in very poor shape, and that's going to potentially contribute to more injuries in the future. So what we need to do is, instead of going from here, 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 and then dipping, what we want to do is slowly avoid that dip and then maybe slowly start increasing your capacity, as I mentioned before, and keep your cardiovascular system and your muscular system as healthy as possible. So the point is, be as healthy and as active as you possibly can within your given injury, and just focus on the things that you can complete while you are battling this injury and while you are overcoming this injury. A great rule of thumb for your rehab and strengthening protocols is to walk out of the gym, walk out of the rehab facility, walk out of your chiro or your PT, knowing for certain that you didn't irritate it or that you didn't get worse. If you even think for 1 second that when you walk out of that rehab room, out of the gym, that you did too much, you probably did. I want you to walk away feeling basically 100% certain that you did not irritate it. Because if you even think for a second that you hurt yourself, you probably did too much. And it's better to do 3 times a week of mild rehab or moderate rehab than to have 2 days a week of mild or easy rehab and then 1 hard day and then feel like you are spending 3 days recovering or 4 days, or maybe you even injured that area worse. Now you have to completely take 2 steps back. So it's better to walk out of that rehab setting or that gym knowing for certain that you made some progress, that you got a good pump in, and that you've progressed your health in the right direction. When it comes to an injury, never use time to determine how long it takes. So if somebody says, hey, how long does that injury, that back injury take? Well, it takes 6 weeks, it takes 8 weeks, it takes 12 weeks. Never use time as a determination of your injury. Some people heal faster, some people heal slower. What you should do instead is be using movement patterns and strengthening as a tool. So when I say time, don't completely rely on 6 weeks as your marker, but instead rely on what does it take to get back into jiu-jitsu. Can you provide the movement standards? Do you have a baseline level of strength that is adequate and necessary to move on to the next level? If you don't have that, it doesn't matter if it's 6 weeks later or 4 weeks later or 10 weeks later. It does not matter whatsoever. If you can't do it, you can't do it. If you can do it, you can do it, and then you could possibly get cleared sooner. So just focus on the actual goal of the movement more so than the time. One free tool that you can use to guide yourself to see if you're getting better is a free survey. So if you're somebody who has lower back issue, you can go to a low back disability index. You can go to a Roland Morris survey. You could basically Google any type of low back pain or injury disability index, and you could take a survey on that. I would highly recommend that you do it every 2 or 3 weeks, and you can track to see if you're getting better. Whether that is because you've gotten an eval, maybe you haven't gotten an eval, and you're not really sure if you're getting better, using a free survey or a free tool is going to help you to see if you're getting better, and you can kind of track your results. And so if you're getting worse and worse, well, then maybe it's time to have an intervention. If you're getting better and better and it's not as fast as you like, well, then maybe you need another intervention. Or maybe if you're just getting better and you just need to be patient, you can see how you're doing on a weekly or bi-weekly or even a monthly basis. So use the free tools. We often use them in our practice and our clinic. And let's be honest, nobody wants to sit there and fill out a survey to see how they're doing. But to be honest, it is a very good guide to see if they're actually progressing. One thing that a lot of people don't like to talk about is your positive mental attitude and how you can focus on the positives while undergoing some of the negatives, right? Yes, at the beginning, when you're first injured, it's really frustrating. It's demoralizing. You start worrying about a lot of the future, or like, what will I be able to do? What can I do? And it's really just a common human nature. And I'm not trying to undermine it for you, but I'm just letting you know, go through that process. I understand it's frustrating, but then at some point in time, you're going to have to make a mental shift and focus on what you can do so that you can get out of pain. If you do the things that I mentioned before, you're likely going to get into a more of a positive environment, and you're going to be in a better mental space so that you can actually complete the exercises. So if you don't believe that you're going to get better, you're likely not going to take the actions and behaviors necessary to get better. So be cautious of your mental thoughts because they do influence the things that you do or don't do. So finally, we all know it's about time to get back on the mat, or the goal is to get back on the mat as soon as possible. You really need to be doing some time-based drilling on the mats and time-based exercises on the mats as well. So for example, if you hurt your low back and now you've done all your rehab and you've gotten through this point, and now you're, let's just say, back on the mat, okay, now can you undergo maybe 10 minutes of drilling a little bit more aggressively? Can you go doing a whole practice without problems or pain? And can you undergo maybe 1 round or 2 rounds or 10 minutes of training without an increased pain? You can't just go from, hey, I got out of pain, hey, I did all my strengthening exercises, I feel like I have my movements, to boom, 100% jiu-jitsu. It is going to cause you some real frustration if you re-injure yourself. I promise you, that's going to be a big hit to your ego and to your mindset if you don't do it. And it's probably going to take you just as long to get back on the mats as it just did to get here right now. So what I'm saying here is, don't go back on the mats too quickly. Do what you can, add a time-based training based off of your capacity and your capability. So for example, you might be going 30 minutes on the mat at 50% of live rolling before you improve your intensity or the time on the mats. You really need to be cautious of this, because picking your right training partners, picking people who you trust is going to be important. Doesn't matter if they're high rank or low rank. If you can't trust them, it doesn't really make a difference. So be very cautious of getting back on the mats, because it's better to be on the mats at 50% and overcoming an injury than it is to be at 50% and then having a re-injury and then having to go and start that whole process all over. So these are some of the top tips that I recommend for you guys to get out of pain and to stay out of pain long term. Thanks again for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you subscribe to our channel, share this content, and I'll see you guys on the mats. Us.